Taoiseach, I want to ask you something that's sort of tangentially connected to this issue of the nursing home charges. Because obviously the overcharging of people has been discussed as a historical issue, but I came across a case today which I suspect is much more widespread, this week should I say, much more widespread, of a couple on the Fair Deal scheme, both on state pensions, whereas you know 80% of the wife of the couple is in a nursing home, is supposed to give over 80% of her income. Now these people don't have any more than that, but the nursing home is charging very significant additional charges. For example, for a physio, €40, for activities, €3 per day, for a chaperone to take a woman who's suffering with Alzheimer's, I want to stress, to go to the physio, €25 per hour, to pay for taxis to take him to the Eye and Ear. In fact, she couldn't go because he couldn't simply afford it, the husband couldn't afford it, which was going to cost about €80. This is somebody, I repeat, where 80% of her pension is going to the nursing home already under the Fair Deal scheme, and he's just left out with the state pension. He has to buy her clothes and all sorts. He doesn't have the money. After a few months in the nursing home, the bill is up to now €3,000 that he simply does not have. Now, that is an unacceptable situation. And the nursing home is now putting pressure on him to give over her social welfare card to the nursing home to get her money for them to pay the bill.
Thank you, Deputy.
Now, if that is going on a widespread basis, it is absolutely shocking. And something needs to be done, because otherwise what we thought we were dealing as a historical wrong is actually persisting and putting elderly, vulnerable and unwell people in an absolutely outrageous situation.
Taoiseach to respond.
Again, I want to thank the deputies for their questions. The Attorney General's report was his own, but as Deputy Callahan pointed out, we did ask him to prepare it. It was commissioned by government in that sense, and we published it because I made a commitment to the House that we would. I do think it was a very solid and comprehensive report. Above all, it pointed out that, at least in the current Attorney General's view, and I think this would have been the same for any Attorney General that I worked with, the state's interest is the public interest. The state can have no other interest than the public interest. And I think often in this country, and perhaps in other countries, people talk about the state in a very cold and almost alien way. The state is always presented as being cold or callous or hostile, and that's because the state has no face. But when you put a face on the state, what is the face of the state? It's the taxpayer. It's the people who depend on public services, like children in our schools, like patients in our hospitals, like older people who need care. It's our citizens. And when you're considering the state's interest, that is the public interest, and it has to look at things in the round. So you can't disregard the interests of the taxpayer. Equally, you can't disregard the needs of people who use our public services today, like children and patients. And that's what the public interest is all about. It's never just about the person in front of you who is making a claim. It has to also be about the taxpayer and all those who depend on our public services. That is the public interest, and you have to take them all into account. I think as well, he pointed out that everyone has a legal strategy. People who sue the state have legal strategies as well as the state does, and there's nothing sinister or secret about that. And he also pointed out the need for legal privilege. It wouldn't be fair to expect one side in a case to disclose the advice they have if the other side isn't willing to do the same. I think while we can all perhaps buy into the concept of being a model litigant, we have to define what that means. And a model litigant shouldn't be one that concedes to every claim or folds in every case. And I don't think anyone would argue that. So you have to define what model litigant actually means. In relation to the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, this was ratified by the last government during my first term as Taoiseach. was very glad that as a government we could do that, very much led by Minister Finney McGrath at the time. I don't believe we're in breach of it, Deputy, but that's not for me to judge. And I don't believe the Convention would have applied retrospectively. But again, I could be incorrect on that, and I'd have to seek advice on it. In terms of the whole concept of reforming the Attorney General's office, as I mentioned earlier, we've no current plans to do that. I'm not hostile to it either, by the way, and we will certainly look at the Labour Party bill in that regard. It would be disingenuous for me to be against it in principle. In fact, when we were in opposition back in 2010, 2011, as part of our new politics document, we proposed a reform of the Attorney General's office as well, transferring some of the functions, I think, to the Ombudsman's office. So don't have a closed mind to the idea of reforming the Attorney General's office, but we'd have to make sure that the reforms are for the better. And it has been the case that legal advice has been published in the past in the form of a note simpliciter. Seamus Wolfe, as Attorney General, published in note simpliciter form our legal advice in relation to the 8th Amendment. But I think where there's litigation, that's a very separate matter. And it wouldn't be right to expect the public, i.e. the state, to publish their legal advice when the people suing the public, i.e. the state, don't do so. Just in relation to the connected issue that Deputy Boyd Barrett raised, there is an issue that has arisen and is arising in relation to nursing homes charging for what are often described as extras or additional services. I do think there has to be greater clarity around this and some guidelines around it about what is genuinely an extra or not. I don't think anyone would expect the fair deal fee paid to nursing homes to cover everything, like taxis, for example, or clothes. But we do need to make sure that we've just proper guidelines and better clarity around what is covered and what isn't, so that people know where they stand.
Thank you, Taoiseach.